Hello and welcome to SME Sustainability webinar series. This is the third in the series, and today we are looking at designing for the circular economy. My name's Trina Watson. I'm the Net Zero Training Manager here at Green Economy. We are an organisation that supports the growth of the green tech sector over in Manchester and also here in West Yorkshire. We work with green tech suppliers and we offer growth advice. We run events and networking. We help with market research, both into competition and opportunities. We run training programs, a bit like this one. We offer sales support, and we also run a platform called the Green Marketplace, which connects up businesses or organisations who want to invest in green tech with local suppliers. We're running these webinars in collaboration with the West Yorkshire Combined Authority Sustainability team. They also run training programs a bit like this one. They offer support with carbon footprinting. They can help you to measure your carbon footprint as well as look at ways to reduce it. They can help with compliance support for any legislation around sustainability. They can support you with making your business practices more circular. That's what we're going to be talking about today. They can come to your site and do an efficiency review and help you find opportunities to save energy and money, and also help with funding applications for sustainability related funding. So the circular economy. We can't talk about the circular economy without first talking about waste. So what is waste? Waste means any substance or object which you discard, intend to discard, or is required to be discarded. And that is the UK legal definition of waste. So whenever we're talking about any kind of taxes, fines, legislation, anything like that regarding waste, this is the definition that's being used. Waste can cause a whole host of problems depending on the type of waste, but the most common of these include air pollution, land pollution and ground contamination, water pollution. Climate change is another big one. So landfill sites emit huge amounts of methane, which is a particularly potent greenhouse gas. Litter is a big problem, particularly in towns and cities. We've probably all seen that. Waste can have a hugely negative impact on biodiversity as well, particularly in oceans and waterways. We've probably all seen the image of a turtle with the beer can pull around its neck, or birds with their heads stuck in takeaway boxes, that kind of thing. And also, the more we waste, the quicker we run out of natural resources. Copper, for example, is due to be mined out by 2040. The more of that copper ends up in landfill, the more we'll need to mine and the quicker we accelerate this process. Global solid waste generation is predicted to grow from 2.1 billion tonnes in 2023 to 3.8 billion tonnes by 2050. There are also huge costs associated with waste. So in 2020, the global direct cost of waste management was an estimated $252 billion. As far as we're concerned, a study by EnviroWise estimated for UK businesses, the cost of waste is on average 3 to 5% of turnover. So a lot of money that's being spent on waste and waste management that could be used elsewhere. One of the most common types of waste that we hear about is plastic packaging. And every year Greenpeace do the Big Plastic Count, which aims to measure and report on the amount of plastic packaging that's being thrown away by UK households. And last year they found that on average, UK households are throwing away around 60 pieces of plastic packaging per household every week. This adds up to 90 billion pieces of plastic packaging being thrown away annually, which is a huge, huge amount of packaging for just 1 year. To try and tackle this growing problem of plastic waste, the government has introduced the extended producer responsibility. And the idea behind this is to try and shift some of the responsibility from households to be more shared with producers. And this is something that will affect you and your organisation if you supply packaged goods to the UK market, if you place goods into packaging, if you import products in packaging, if you hire or loan out reusable packaging, or if you supply empty packaging. So most people who buy, sell, produce any kind of good will have to think about this at some point. At the moment, the request for SMEs or the ask for SMEs is to collect their packaging data and to report it. So looking at how you supplied the packaging type, packaging material and weight. For larger businesses, on top of this, after 2025, they'll also be expected to pay a number of different fees, including a waste management fee, a registration charge to the environmental regulator, and scheme administration costs. So this isn't something that affects SMEs financially right now, apart from obviously the resources required to collect and report that data. But what we've seen with other environmental and sustainability legislation is that it starts off with just the largest businesses having to do a certain process, and that very quickly trickles down to smaller businesses as well. So if you can get ahead of the curve and start reducing your waste now, you'll save a lot of money in the future. So the standard model for most of the products we create is the linear economy, also known as take, make, waste. So we start off by we collect raw materials. This could be mining them, taking them out the ground, could be harvesting after growing outside. We then use these to make something. So this is the production stage, using those raw materials to produce a part or a product. And then when we're done using them, they become waste. So this is the end of life. When the user's done with that product, it's discarded, potentially ends up in landfill. Another more detailed version of this is looking at raw material extraction, parts manufacturer, product manufacturer, service provider or retailer, user, and then end of life. And why does so much of those raw materials that are extracted become waste? Partly we're speculatively producing. We're not waiting for consumers to demand a product. We're producing it and then trying to sell it. A lot of products are designed to fail after a certain amount of time. This planned obsolescence will be familiar to anyone who has an iPhone. It can often be more expensive to fix products than it is to actually just buy a new one. So there's no financial incentive to get something repaired. The financial incentive is to throw it away and just replace it like for like. And there's not always somewhere to recycle or repurpose a product, even if you have the intention to. So our economic systems are very much based on a system of cradle to grave, with the final destination for a lot of materials being those landfill sites. So the waste hierarchy is a conceptual framework designed to guide and rank waste management decisions at both the individual and organizational level. And it's used to reduce waste at each stage of that linear process. So firstly, we try and prevent the creation of waste in the first place. Does this product need packaging? If we can't prevent, we look to reduce the amount of waste created. Could I get more of this product in one package, for example, and therefore less packaging needs to be created? If something does need to be created, could it be reused multiple times? Could it be reused as something else? A wine bottle that's sent back and then refilled with wine, for example, or perhaps when it's empty is used as a vase. If it can't be reused, can it be recycled? So recycling is different to reuse as it involves a physical or chemical alteration of a product. So rather than using the wine bottle as is, again as a wine bottle or for another purpose, we melt it down and turn it into a different glass product. And that's recycling rather than reusing. If you can't recycle, can you recover something? So banana peels, for example, can't be recycled, but if we compost them, we can recover some nutrients. Some products we can burn and recover energy. And finally, disposal. This is an absolute last resort. Most of our systems globally are built around recycling, but despite this, only around 19% of waste is actually recycled globally. So not very much, considering that this is the one that we focus on. Why is that so low? Well, not all the materials that we actually use to produce things can be recycled. Even if we could, consumption's far outpacing recycling. We can't recycle fast enough to keep up with the rate at which we're producing new things. Recycling also requires a certain amount of energy, so both in the processing, for example, melting down a glass bottle, but also in the transportation of goods to the appropriate recycling facility. And they're not always available. And there also has to be a market for the recycled materials. Assuming we do have the facilities, somebody needs to want to use those recycled materials, otherwise it's not going to happen. So for all of these reasons, the circular economy focuses on the top three. And there is a place for recycling and recovery in the circular economy, which we'll come on to in the next few slides. But really, what we want to be doing is preventing, reducing, and reusing. So the circular economy, as opposed to the linear economy, is one which maximizes the lifespan of resources. It keeps materials in circulation for as long as possible, if not forever. So it does start off with those raw materials in the same way, but the first stage after that is sustainable design and thinking about how to minimize the production of waste at every stage in the design phase. Then we have production and distribution. And the other big difference is in the use phase. So whilst there is still a use phase, the focus is on extending that use phase as long as possible, reusing, repairing, etc. When it does come to end of life, the next stage is collection, and that waste is managed to either be recycled, reused, or repurposed for something else, and as little residual waste is created as possible. So the circular economy, the three key differences, the three key principles that separate it from a linear economy are designing out waste and pollution, circulating materials, and regenerating nature. It's a closed loop system, it's regenerative by design, and it's very much cradle to cradle as opposed to cradle to grave. So how can we do this when we are set up for a linear economy? So one of the key ways to make our products and services more circular is to think about how we can keep materials in the loop, how to make those loops as short as possible. So it starts off by focusing on the user. How can we keep that product or service with the original user being used for its original purpose for as long as possible? This can be done through repair, reuse, but also redesigning something so that it remains viable for longer. And basically, the longer a user can continue using a product, the better. The next shortest loop is when the service provider can keep materials in circulation or return them to circulation perhaps with another user, reusing, repurposing. A medium loop involves going back to the stage of product manufacturer. So going back to the manufacturer with a product that it would otherwise be at its end of life and seeing if they can turn it into something like new, turn it into something else. The longest loop is recycling. So as well as being the lowest option on the waste hierarchy, it's also our last port of call in circularity. The shorter the loop, the better. The reason for this is materials, value, and quality are all lost along the loop. So the longer the loop is, the more is lost. Recycling works well for some materials like aluminium or glass, which can be recycled endlessly and they never lose any quality. And for many materials, the carbon emissions associated with recycling are much lower than extracting the virgin material. So copper, for example, the processing of recycled copper emits about a tenth of the emissions as extracting and processing virgin copper ore. However, it's still the last resort as many products that can be recycled, thinking plastic, lose value and they lose quality every time that they're recycled. Products that aren't designed to be recycled also sometimes need additional chemicals or additives to make them usable, which have their own environmental impact. So in the same way as within the waste hierarchy, we want to focus on everything that we can do before recycling. Pete Seeger is a folk singer and environmental campaigner, and he said, if it can't be reduced, repaired, rebuilt, refurbished, refinished, resold, recycled, or composted, then it should be restricted, redesigned, or removed from production. When talking about the circular economy, a lot of the key principles begin with R. So you may hear organisations talk about 3 Rs or the 6 Rs or the 5 Rs. Over the next few slides, we'll discuss the 8 Rs, and these are 8 principles that can help you operate in a more circular way. You can and should apply these principles both to your own processes as an organisation, as a manufacturer, but also as a customer to the goods and services you procure. Can you be investing in products and services that are based in circular practices? So we've split the 8 Rs into 3 phases. The first phase is the design phase. And the design phase, when we're thinking about circularity, is all about using resources more wisely. So the first R is refuse. And refuse is all about preventing waste in the first place. So questioning whether we really need a product. Has your office gone paperless, for example? This is a really simple way to refuse paper waste by just saying, we don't need it, we don't need paper, we're going to do everything on the computer from now on. That's an example of your own processes. When looking at the products that you buy, you can also look at choosing ones that come without packaging, for example. That's a way to refuse plastic packaging. Leeds Teaching Hospital worked on a circular economy pilot programme around the decontamination of surgical instruments. So decontamination of surgical trays is a huge area of cost, but also carbon impact to hospitals. And around 85% of the carbon footprint associated with reusable surgical instruments is attributed to the decontamination process. And research had found that across 4 surgical services, over 75% of instruments included within the standard trays remained unused, but they still had to be decontaminated. Once that tray was out and had been in the room with a patient during surgery, for example, it needed decontaminating. So what Leeds Teaching Hospitals Trust did is they audited the surgical instrument trays for one particular type of surgery as part of the Green Surgery Challenge, and the outcome was a reduction in instrument numbers from 119 to 49, which is a huge reduction. And they created green trays, which are now routinely used, which reduce massively the demand for sterilisation services. The rationalised tray is estimated to save around £23 per procedure in sterilisation, around 1.77 kilograms in waste generation, and an annual reduction of 740 kilograms of CO2e. So based on an estimated 42,000 of these surgeries being carried out nationwide every year, the sterilisation cost saving alone would be around £1 million. So huge cost savings, as well as waste reduction and carbon savings there. The second R in the design phase is redesign, also called reimagine. How we design our products is basically the most important stage, but also how we design our processes and our services. Between 70 and 80% of waste is created at the design stage. And this cartoon illustrates it quite nicely. So when we look at traditional cost accounting, product design is fairly small. So you might think that it casts the smallest shadow, but actually in terms of waste creation, product design is the most important. That determines how a customer is going to use the product, how a customer is going to interact with the product, where it will end up at end of life, what the materials used will determine whether it can be recycled, whether it can be reused. So a lot is determined there. A good example is if washing detergent companies make a product that can be used at a lower temperature, for example, you get the same wash at 40 degrees than you do at 60 degrees. That's a very easy way for the design to reduce the amount of energy needed in order for a user to use that product. So thinking about the design stage, whenever you're producing a product, or whenever you're reviewing a product or service, could you be using recycled materials, for example? Could you be using recyclable materials that mean that at the end of life, that product is going to get either recycled or reused? So Darkwoods Coffee are a coffee shop based in Slough, and they wanted to reduce the impact of their product, and so got in touch with the West Yorkshire sustainability team with an idea to introduce returnable container for local customers. So West Yorkshire sustainability team helped Darkwoods by providing extensive market research and customer assessments to gauge interest on their returnable container programme. They performed carbon footprint analysis comparing the new approach with the existing linear model. That helped them determine cost effectiveness and the environmental impact. They were also able to connect Darkwoods with a tech company who were offering tracking software that monitored the container use, and that was really helpful in assessing the carbon footprint and the resulting waste reduction. So the result was a reduction in annual carbon emissions by 16 tonnes, which is absolutely massive, and also reduced annual packaging and delivery costs by around £3,100. So this demonstrates how the redesign of a process or a system can have a huge impact, as well as just redesigning a product or redesigning a type of packaging. By designing a way that they could facilitate that reuse of containers as well as the container itself, had a massive impact on their environmental impact, but also on their costs. So the second phase is the use phase. And when looking at circularity in the use phase, it's all about increasing the lifespan of products. So the first R in the use phase is reuse. And there are a number of different ways that you can apply this to your business. You may be familiar with reuse platforms. Warpit, for example, is a business-to-business sharing platform that enables businesses to list old office furniture, for example, that they might be getting rid of, and other businesses to pick that up. There are also a number of zero waste initiatives that help to facilitate sharing initiatives too. So Leeds School Uniform Exchange is one where parents can bring school uniform that they're no longer using as their children have grown out of it, and take some from other parents who, again, no longer need that particular size of school uniform. So when you're thinking about your own processes, have a look at your shopping list, if you will. What do you procure? What are you wanting to procure that you could acquire from a sharing platform? Is there anything you're getting rid of that you could give to a sharing platform? And thinking about the products and services that you provide, could you facilitate sharing of your products? So if you're a school uniform manufacturer, for example, you could offer a take-back scheme that's then donated to the Leeds School Uniform Exchange. You could facilitate it with a uniform drop-off box, something like that. Toast are a clothing brand who run a platform for customers to return any of their products that they no longer want. So their website states that to prolong the journey of our pieces, we will now take all unwanted clothing, accessories, and textiles back, regardless of quality or condition, to be donated, recycled, remade into new designs, or resold with reworn. Items can be returned to any of our UK shops or sent to us free of charge. So they facilitate that take back and the resharing through their online platform. They also work with Charity Trade, who help facilitate the reselling for charity of unwanted clothes, unwanted garments. So they make sure that anything that isn't suitable to be sold isn't just going in the bin. The next R in the use phase is repair. So applying this principle to your organisation could look like offering a repair service for your products, or on the procurement side, procuring products and services that are able to be repaired, that offer a repair service like this. But it might also be something that you can apply to the design phase. So looking at modularity, for example, this is where you design a product into separate components that can be they are obviously combined as a whole when you're making the full product, but by designing the components that can be separately added and replaced, makes a product much easier to repair and makes a product much easier to upgrade if just one component needs upgrading or just one component fails. Fairphone, for example, are an organisation that create modular phones. Instead of being a sealed box that you have to repurchase every few years when it no longer accepts software updates, each component is, you are able to actually take that out of the phone yourself and buy an updated camera, for example, or battery or casing for something in there. So it's much easier for customers to repair and upgrade as technology improves rather than having to throw it away and buy a new phone. So a Manchester-based example are Heels and Toes, who manufacture children's shoes, and their design is completely modular. So you're able to interchange the straps, the base unit, in a combination of different colours and sizes. So what this means is as your toddler grows, rather than throwing away the whole shoe, you can change the straps, you can move it around, you can adjust it. And the way that the shoe can be disassembled also makes it easier to recycle the whole shoe. As well as being easier to repair and prolonging the life of the product, it also means that customers can have a completely customizable item for their children. So this is a really good example of how, as well as using the circular model to create a more sustainable product, it's also added value for the customer who can get a completely bespoke shoe or design. The next R of the use phase is refurbish. So refurbishing is something that's quite common in tech, and it involves repairing certain components of a product to return it to a like-new condition. You may have heard of Music Magpie, who are a company that sell refurbished phones. You're able to send in your old phone, often for a fee, and they will refurbish it and sell it on. Philips are a manufacturer of medical equipment, and they offer a take-back service and then refurbish sale through their Diamond Select program. So through this program, customers can buy solutions that are on average 20% cheaper than items of a similar warranty, and these are ones that have been refurbished through the scheme. So as a manufacturer, Philips maintains control over all the material assets, and they are able to effectively identify devices that are fit to be refurbished. The result of this has been that 7,000 tonnes of refurbished medical imaging equipment has been reintroduced to the market over the last decade. They also offer a service called Philips Smart Path, which provides software updates alongside product and component replacements to maintain device performance over the long term. And this can be a really big problem in tech, is that certain components fail or certain components become out of date, and then the whole product becomes unusable. By making sure that any software or anything like that is able to be updated, that's a really big boost to the overall life of the product. The next R in the use phase is remanufacture. And this is similar to refurbish, except rather than keeping the product as it was, remanufacturing can involve taking the product right down to its individual components and either using those components to recreate a like new product or to create something different entirely. Caterpillar, who manufacture plant and machinery, has a take-back scheme for all of its machinery. So when it comes to the end of its life, it's remanufactured either into a new product or returned to a product as new condition and resold. So when a returned piece of machinery arrives at a reman factory, so CAT reman, that's the name of the scheme, it's disassembled down to the smallest part. So each element then goes through a cleaning process. It's inspected against strict engineering specifications, And through advanced salvaging techniques, worn-out components are updated, repaired, and converted into production-ready materials that can then be put into either new products or similar products that have been remanufactured. Customers then able to purchase these remanufactured products either at a fraction of the cost of a new part or fraction the cost of a full repair. And a lot of these remanufactured products come with a like new warranty. So this take back and resell model keeps materials in circulation for longer. It gives customers access to a cheaper product, and it's also an extra revenue stream for Caterpillar. The final stage in the process is the end of life phase. So when we're looking at the end of life, in terms of circularity, the focus here is on meaningfully recycled products. So whilst recycling is the last resort, there will be some materials that may not be able to be remanufactured, may not be able to be reused. And so it's important that those are properly recycled. So the first hour of end of life is recycle. And processing materials through recycling makes sense, especially when the products can't be used any longer and there are materials within it to recover. But there are two ways that you can recycle. So upcycling makes high quality materials. So think recycling polyamide fishing nets to make Econil for outerwear. So that's a material that's used in coats or sports gear. Or downcycled, so recycling wood products into paper, for example. And whilst not all products can be recycled at our curbside recycling, if you have something that may be able to recycle but is more difficult, maybe more specialist, company like TerraCycle specialises in hard to recycle materials, including things like cigarette butts or coffee capsules. So where local facilities are not taking certain waste, you can get in touch with them, tell them what you've got, and they'll be able to let you know whether it's something that they're able to recycle. Chimera Fabrics are a local textile company who've invested in some state-of-the-art wool recycling machinery. And so they initially ran a pilot project on recycling old jumpers from the military. Now they are able to recycle a number of woolen products. They recycle their own products as well as taking in products from the wider textile industry. The final R in the end of life stage is recover, also sometimes known as rot. And this can refer to the recovery of energy, ingredients, or nutrients from materials. So composting is probably the most common example of recovery. This is a process through which we recover nutrients from food or other organic materials, either for growing new food or growing other plants. And it's one that's important to highlight because biodegradable is something that we hear a lot. It's a big marketing buzzword in sustainability. And when something is determined to be biodegradable, it means that it breaks down. It means it will break down and rot essentially. And often it's used interchangeably with composting. But it's important to distinguish whether a product is able to be home composted or industrially composted. So home composting means that you can throw it in your garden compost pile and it will break down under normal weather conditions. Industrial composting is when something will break down, it will biodegrade, but it needs to be under conditions of extreme heat and large pressure. And there are a lot of products that advertise themselves as biodegradable that can only be industrially composted. Vegware, for example, is used a lot in food provision, in catering. And this is something that is industrially compostable, but not in your curbside recycling. So if you throw it in your normal compost, it could last in there almost as long as a plastic food pot. So it's really important when you're using these kind of products to make sure that you are actually signed up to their collection scheme, for example, where they will take it away for you and make sure it's composted appropriately. Toast Ale are an ale manufacturer up here in the north, and they recover ingredients from bread that would have otherwise been thrown away. So they use surplus bread from bakeries, from bread manufacturers, and use that instead of barley in the ale production process. So by doing this, they're preventing food waste from going to landfill, but it's also a much lower emissions process than using barley in the first place. It uses less land, it uses less water, uses less energy, and emits lower carbon emissions as well. Since they started brewing, they've saved 3.3 million slices of bread from landfill, and they've also been donating money in projects that campaign for systemic change to the food system. So that's a really good example of where a key ingredient for the production of something else has been recovered through a circular practice. And it's also an example of how one company, a producer, has solved a waste problem for another company. So rather than the bread companies throwing that all away and that adding to their waste bill, to their carbon footprint, instead Toast are taking it away for them and turning it into something useful, something good. And I think that's a really good point to bridge into the next slide, which is all about collaborating with suppliers. So the circular economy isn't something that you can do on your own. It has to be a collaborative effort. So think about the suppliers that you work with. Think about the suppliers, particularly regular suppliers that you have a good relationship with, and think about whether you can create a win-win. Like the toast example, could you solve a problem for them? It also solves a problem for you. We had a client here at Green Economy, a contact lens manufacturer, who, when they were looking at their carbon footprint, identified huge costs and carbon from their cardboard packaging. So they were getting this thick cardboard packaging delivered to them. They took the contact lenses out of it, and then they had to dispose of that, which they had to pay for. So what they did is they put their heads together with their supplier, who was the one buying the cardboard packaging. And instead of using cardboard, they swapped this out for collapsible plastic crates, which, as they received them, were flattened, stored, and then when they reached a sort of critical number, they were put back on the truck that brought the contact lenses in the first place, sent back to the supplier, and the whole process starts again. And they were reused every time. This was a huge cost saving both for the supplier, who was no longer having to buy that cardboard packaging, but also for the customer, who wasn't having to pay for the waste processing. So in total, they saved around £50,000. This was a 9-month payback. So really, really big numbers there. And it's something that's benefiting both customer and supplier. So going to look at an activity now. How can you apply the 8 R's to your business? Look at what you do, identify one product or service, and think about those 8 R's. For each R, ask yourself 2 questions. Do you currently apply this principle? And is there potential to start applying it? So with the Dartwoods example, looking at coffee cups, do they currently refuse the waste caused by coffee cups? Well, not at the moment, but there is actually potential to do this by using something else rather than a paper coffee cup. Have they currently redesigned their processes or their products around cups? No, but there is potential, so they put an X in the potential box. Similarly for coffee beans, well, it doesn't currently or potentially get redesigned. They can't be reused, you can't repair them. But do we recycle them? Well, not at the moment, but there's certainly potential to. Could we recover something from those? And there's potential there. So working through each product and service and thinking about how you could start applying to those principles. This is something that you're not going to complete all in one go, but hopefully this is a useful tool that you can take back into your business and start reviewing each of your products and services that you either provide or procure, and working your way through those principles to make your organisation more circular. And finally, thinking about how you finance circular economy initiatives. So Innovate UK are a body who support the development of innovative products in the UK. They offer grants that help develop and test circular economy ideas. The latest round is currently closed, but this will be available again. They tend to accept applications about 3 times a year. And any UK registered business can apply for funding to research, test, develop circular economy approaches in chemicals, biotextiles, metals, construction materials, research, or data. Another way to fund circular developments is to think about how you can bring them into your business plan. So a couple of circular business models that you could think about, take back and sell, for example. This is a way to create another revenue stream for your business. Philips, that we looked at before, they earned around 18% of their 17.8 billion euro revenue from circular products and services in 2022. Their goal for this year, 2025, is to increase this to 25%. Servitization is another way to look at things. Rather than selling products, could you sell a service and keep control of the products yourself? So there's a company called Baines Tires who were initially a treading and tyre management company. And what they now do is they offer a lease model for delivery fleet van tyres. So rather than selling a tyre that the customer then owns and disposes of, they lease the tyres. And when the tyres come to the end of their life, they take them back, replace them for the user, but they retread them, they refit them to new vans throughout the life of the contract. So what they sell in effect is a van mileage service, not tyres. And the tyres themselves are actually an asset that they own and maintain. Sharing and reuse as well. So TerraCycle, who we mentioned before, operates a platform called Loop, which provides reusable packaging. So TerraCycle manage the collection, cleaning, and redelivery of this packaging. And their business model essentially is to get paid by major brands and retailers who need support in facilitating the reuse model, and they do that for them. So that's another way to create a revenue stream out of a circular practice. So a few actions to take away. Review the goods and services you procure, go through each one, go through each of the circular economy principles and think about how you can apply them. Consider modular tech. There's a link there to the Fairphone that I mentioned. Review the products and services that you provide, or perhaps your own internal systems and products. Again, working your way through, applying each of the 8 Rs. What do you currently do? What could you potentially do? Donate any unused products to a zero waste partner. Contact the WICA sustainability team. If you've got an idea, they can help you. They can help you with advice. They can help you with market research. They can help you with other kinds of support. And lastly, identify opportunities for collaboration. Start speaking to your suppliers. Start thinking through who you could work with in order to create that win-win situation. Bit of further reading here. There's a study there on a number of initiatives, including the Leeds Teaching Hospital one in medtech, circular economy pilot programs. Great video there by Marlene Jola on kind of principles of building the circular economy of the future. Cradle to Cradle, a really good book on how we can make things to be more circular. And then a really interesting podcast there on how we can support circular business and how we can make circular business profitable business as well. Thank you very much for your time. This has been the SME Sustainability Series, Designing for the Circular Economy.